Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well. I just thought that I would make these videos because I'm sure everyone is missing my voice right now. But seriously, I put the PowerPoint or the lesson up on the website, but I realized that a lot of what I have on it are just questions that I plan to discuss in class. And since I'm asking you to utilize these two articles that you read as sources for a research paragraph, I just want to make sure that everyone understands the content of the articles first of all. So one thing that I wanted to mention to you before I get into going in this in detail is that I've now updated the website, both the one that I'm in here and courses, to have my scanned copies from the textbook. The original email I sent to you had articles that were web sources, and those were a little bit longer than the textbook articles just because the textbook is kind of just giving us pieces of these. So make sure that you actually look at the new ones that I've attached on my most recent email so that you don't have to read through the really long transcript for the Obama speech. So make sure you go through and do that. So we're looking at two sources for today, and the goal of looking at these is just to give you guys a little bit of information and make sure you feel confident in what's being discussed in both of the articles so that you can work on your own writing of a paragraph. So I said here I want you to view the two articles you read from today as possible research sources for the upcoming paper. I'm not asking you specifically to use them in your paper. I'm just saying that these are good examples of the kind of research that you do when you're looking at social impact analysis. So pay close attention because you will actually be using them just in the exercise we're doing today. Again, not for your own paper, just for today's practice exercise. So the first article is from Obama, a fundamental threat to the American dream. And I just have some questions very quickly I want to go over to break it down to make sure everybody understands the content, because this is the first option for a source to use for your research paragraph. So my question is, what is the specific perspective Obama holds regarding the issue of income inequality? And so I'm asking you to think about how you might complete this statement. And again, I wish we were here in conversation to do that together, but I'll just kind of give you my breakdown. So the statement begins, in his speech, A Fundamental Threat to the American Dream, former President Barack Obama expresses his belief that, right? And the reason why I wanted to begin by doing this is because, as we talked about before, when you're using a source in an article or in an essay, it's really important that you understand exactly what the perspective is of the author, because you need to use that when you're setting up the source, and you need to be able to interpret it appropriately and not misquote him or her. So if I were to break this down and say what the belief is that he's expressing, I would say that his belief is that income inequality is the most important threat to American culture right now. And it's something that we need to be working to resolve because it impacts a lot of people negatively. So he has a rather pessimistic view of this situation, that he thinks it's really a big threat. So that's the perspective, and now let's talk about how he utilizes different points to support it. The first question I have was, why does he mention Abraham Lincoln? There's two different sections of the essay in which he talks about him. The first one, as I mentioned here, is on 339, so I'm just going to read the way that he uses him here. This is in the third paragraph of the article, about halfway down. Fourth paragraph. He says, it was Abraham Lincoln, a self-described poor man's son, who started a system of land-grant colleges all over this country so that any poor man's son could go learn something new. So the reason why he's mentioning Lincoln here is because he is himself an example of the supposed American dream of a rags to riches story. And not only that, because he has his background, most likely, he made it a really big point in his presidency and in his legal policies to try and offer opportunities for your average or your low-class American to get an education and improve his or her life, right? And that's the same reason why he's quoted again on 341. The whole point here of mentioning him in paragraph 17, about halfway through, is to give a quote. It says, as Lincoln once said, while we do not propose any war upon capital, we do wish to allow the humblest man an equal chance to get rich with everybody else. So the idea here is, again, that Lincoln encapsulates this American dream, which of course Obama is saying doesn't exist in the same way anymore, but it's a way for him to provide this cultural foundation. My third question here, what does he mean when he says that we can't look at the past through rose-colored glasses? So this term is one that's used a lot in American culture, viewing something with rose-colored glasses. It's basically an idiom that means I only understand something through my own experience, right? So the way it goes is you assume that somebody has gone through life with some sunglasses or glasses that are rose colored, and he or she doesn't realize that some people might have yellow colored glasses or blue or whatever else, right? So the point is, you're living your life with only your limited perspective. And so he's saying we can't do that. So to answer the question here, why is he saying that? It's in the sentence that follows. So this is paragraph 9 at the bottom of 339. He says, we can't look at the past through rose-colored glasses. The economy didn't always work for everyone. Racial discrimination locked millions out of poverty or out of opportunity. Women were too often confined to a handful of often poorly paid professions, and it was only through painstaking struggle that more women and minorities and Americans with disabilities began to win the right to more fairly and fully participate in the economy. So this is where he's saying basically we can't be so narrow-sighted or so ignorant as to think that nobody in America has struggled. That yes, we have an American dream, we have a lot of really great and memorable rags to riches stories, but it's definitely not the case for a lot of people who are considered underprivileged. The fourth question, why does he claim that we have accepted more income inequality than many other nations? I think this is a really big point that he's making on 341. He's talking about how there's a lot of other developed countries that have income inequality and they make it a big deal. But for some reason here in America, we just don't focus on it that much, even if it is a big deal, right? So this is paragraph 17. And just to explain a little bit of what he says, in fact, we've often accepted more income inequality than many other nations for one big reason, because we were convinced that America is a place where even if you're born with nothing, with a little hard work, you can improve your own situation over time and build something better to leave your kids. So he's saying we never really think that much about the struggle of poverty because we say, well, it's not going to last long. Eventually you'll overcome it. So we don't need to focus on it so much because anyone can move up from poverty. So we don't think about a lot of ways to deal with combating it as he thinks we should. Last question here from this article is what are some specific impacts of social inequality that he mentions? And hint, 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 this is a really big section for you guys because your paragraph writing assignment is going to ask you to focus on a specific impact. So you could choose one that Obama lists here. This is on 342 right at the end. I'm not going to break down all of them, but probably one of the more interesting ones for me is about halfway through that center paragraph. He says, we actually tend to trust each other less when there's greater inequality, which I think is a really important and interesting point. The idea being that yes, we distrust authorities, we think the government could maybe help us more, but what happens when you have such a huge distance between the rich and the poor is that they don't understand each other, and it leads to this polarization where the poor say, I despise the rich because they have everything handed to them, and the rich say, I despise the poor because we live in America where you should be able to make something of yourself. Why aren't you doing that? So he talks about that. He ends by talking about an increase in cynicism, polarization. So any of these points will be a good one for you to use as the foundation for the paragraph you're going to write. Okay, I'm done talking about the first source. The next video, I'm just going to go briefly over the second article and then give you guys some analysis to think about as you're trying to decide which of these sources might be more interesting for your own writing purposes. So, to be continued.